right, it looks like people are starting to pop in. Welcome. Thanks for being here, folks. We will get things started momentarily, giving people a chance to join us here. While we're waiting for folks, I'm just adding our website to the chat so you can check out Writer's Room if you have not already. I'm sure if you got the Eventbrite and went through all that, you are at least somewhat familiar with us. Okay. Well, it is 7 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Spencer Johnson. I am the host for this virtual reading series, Readings from the Room, which is sponsored by the Writers' Room of Boston. This is a series that was launched in 2021 as a way of bringing people together in the writing community during the pandemic, and it has continued as a way to keep this community going, especially because it allows for a different level of connectivity for the community beyond just the local Boston writers, and getting into we've had writers from all over the country and even some hopefully some international writers coming up at some point in the future. For anyone that is new to us, the Writers' Room of Boston is a co-working space in downtown Boston for any and all writers, whether you are established or emerging. The room is open 24 hours a day and provides desks and silence and the quiet companionship of other writers. If you are interested in joining there is membership information on the website. There is also no reason that you should worry about paying dues as well, because if you are in need, there are scholarships and things available to help you join the Writers' Room. We welcome all writers. This has been in the Writers' Room has been available in Boston since 1993. And the pandemic kind of revitalized some of the programs and workshops and things that through the magic of the internet, being able to invite more people to join through various things. So you can follow the Writers' Room on Facebook, Instagram, and of course, check out the website for information as well. This series is made possible by grants from the Mass Cultural Council and Boston Cultural Council, and of course, the funding of people like you. So if you're interested in making a donation, you can do so on the website as well. Tonight, we have two wonderful readers for you. We have Meghan Miraglia and Jen Martelli. I'm really excited to introduce them both to you as we go along this evening. We will have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to throw your questions into the Q&A feature of Zoom, and we will get to them at the end. We'll get to as many of them as we have time for at the end of the reading. And of course, if you want to show your support, you can throw things in the chat as well to offer support, and both virtual and of course your presence is support as well. But if you'd like to say anything in support, you can do so in the chat. I think that covers all of my housekeeping for this evening. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our first reader this evening. Jennifer Martelli has received fellowships from the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, Monson Arts, and the Massachusetts Cultural Council. Her work has appeared in the Academy of American Poets, Poem a Day, Poetry, Best of the Net Anthology, Braving the Body Anthology, Verse Daily, Plume, the Tahoma Literary Review, and elsewhere. She is the author of Psychic Party, Under the Bottle Tree, and The Queen of Queens, which won the Italian American Studies Association Book Award and was shortlisted for the Massachusetts Book Award. Jennifer Martelli is co-editor of is co-poetry editor of Myrrh, and you can find more information about her at jenmartelli.com. I will put that in the chat as she begins her reading. Thank you, Jen. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Spencer. It's wonderful to be here. I've enjoyed all the readings from the Writers' Room, and I'm particularly thrilled to be reading with Meghan tonight. I'm going to be reading from my new book, which will be due out first, Psychic Party Under the Bottle Tree. Just a little bit about how I set up these few poems. I began and ended this reading on my selection with two different poems that were born from the same mother, and that's her right there. And they took a really, really long time to write from when I first saw this image to actually writing the poem, but talks a little bit about my process in writing. So I'm going, the first poem and the last poem basically started as the same poem. You might hear some echoes. 1 year after my friend posted a photo of Jean-Léon Jaromet's The Bacchante, head of a woman with the horns of a ram, a woman crawls through a hole behind her medicine cabinet, finds an unused apartment, walls skim smooth, doors hung, shelves for cups, hooks to hang spider plants and lunaria in macrame slings knotted with undyed cotton yarn. She could put a baby grand piano in this living room. She could have two living rooms. She posts this discovery to her TikTok, and the video goes viral in a single day. This dream I've had my whole life. In the dream dictionary, the one with a creepy eyed sun and crescent moons against a blue nighttime sky, it says, dreaming you found that hidden or secret room suggests new strengths, new roles. When I wake next day, I'll sprout thick horns like a ram. They'll curl back into me. Cyrus. The globe's horoscope tells me to avoid abstract concepts, to avoid half truths, to change my hair, to examine asexuality. The moon will rise at 4:09 p.m. today. A crown of autumnal planets will have risen by then too. I watched the end of Elizabeth when Kate Blanchett has her ladies in waiting share her hair to the scalp all bald, paint her with lead. Cat, she says to the weeping girl, I am a virgin again. It took time to do this, the scissors dull, the toxic lead in vinegar to make Cyrus crushed with a pestle in a stone cup. The globe's horoscope warns me, hunker down. I have all this time to watch my plants dry up, the vines with the old nightshades and pots out back, the mums and cosmos, even my one succulent. I had the idea of growing things. My lucky rubber plant skeleton is showing its leaves, bone light, green, and lunar. Someone out there is angry with me. My horoscope says tonight the moon isn't good. Don't reciprocate. Don't reply to correspondence. So this next poem is a sonnet, but I read anything I read by Diane Seuss changed my life. But when I read her book, Still Life with Two Dead Peacocks and a Girl, she had a section in there where she wrote in these sonnets written in American sentences, which each line had 17 syllables. And I loved that I could count things and it like they would fit on a line. I just love that. So I really owe this poem and quite a few poems in this book to her. I also tried to crochet a long time ago and I was really bad at it. I crocheted a uterus, but not because I tried. Burly men hoisted the saints on their shoulders and marched them through my town. Lucy, Anthony, Peter, Rocco, Padre Pio, the Madonna. Saints paraded through the August streets, feathered in silvery tailed bills, each bill a prayer. Those in more pain taped bigger bills to cement robes. Once, a distant niece was dressed as an angel, hooked to a cable hung over an ocean of hands. Later, my friend took a lily from church, stuck it in a glass jar on her yellow kitchen table. cream stigma, comical, lumpy, an old world penis. She taught me how to crochet one summer during the feast. She said I needed to count. Make sure you finger all your stitches and keep your loops loose so the hook goes through. My hands grew soft as the orange yarn let go of its lanolin, the stale hook slippery. I crocheted a uterus, but not because I tried. Look, I said, look at the womb. It's like an old holy woolen relic. She brewed strong black coffee in a tin pot. We talked about our sins. So this next poem will age me somewhat. Cat Stevens, who is now Yusuf Islam, wrote this song Moon Shadow, and that's what I'm referencing. And I also reference the daughters of Job, and the names I give them are really their names. I didn't make these up in my mind, though it sounds like I did, but I didn't. Did it take long to find me? Moon Shadow is a happy, prayerful song, a song from Teaser and the Firecat. Long ago, album covers were big, and the Firecat was an orange moon, and the moon was as silver as Teaser's hair. In the song, a man is dismembered, hands, eyes, legs, mouth, tongue, all gone. Yet he remains grateful, like Job, whose daughter Eyeshadow is killed and returned along with her sisters, Cinnamon and Dove, in all of Job's lands as a reward from God. Long ago, I admired gratitude, prayed for pain to teach me until I actually felt pain. Now I'm just greedy and clumsy. In last night's dream, I made messy cat eyes with liner, smudged ashy gray silkweed around my orbital sockets. The moon was my grandma's eye, looking down for me, her lid shadowed by anemia and soft powdery blue. Two more poems. Meet. In the dream during my second sleep, the letters and all the words in the book I wrote morphed. Sharp glyphs with horns, eyes laid sideways, arrows, black birds flying away. I wake too late on Sunday and cook meat in salty red sauce to make amends to my husband for my mean words I said and meant. The sausages fry in their gut tubes, curled, lovers spooning, and the skin sears in fat and spices, fennel, sage, pepper. Plath, in her journal, wrote, the letters grew barbs and ram's horns. Shall I eat this meat after years of not? Shall I reach out? Today, what is it I must attend to with love? I can never read things in a dream. And this last poem, again, was conceived with her in mind, and started out as the same poem as the first poem and took years to sort of separate. Growing out my bangs. When I crossed Humphrey Street on my way to the short brick row of shops, bank, dry cleaner, deli, liquor store, everything but a place to buy rope, I passed under the worms dangling from the maples. And for a moment, I didn't feel afraid, jealous, unnoticed, hungry, hot. I heard a siren from blocks over, but couldn't tell which streets, which way, how far, and turned to see my poor old body pooled on the sidewalk like a dress I'd stepped out of and left for the next morning to wash. So I figured I was dead, had died minutes ago, but hadn't been told. Shame. I'd worn my favorite headband too, the one with plastic horns, thick, pink, and pearlescent, that held fast and shone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was absolutely fantastic. Such beautiful poems. I'm blown away by the imagery and the way that you bring all sorts of visions out of it. Like, I mean, you mentioned dreams several times in different poems, and there is a dreamlike quality to those. Um, I am now excited to introduce you to our next poet for the evening. Meghan Miraglia is a poet, artist, educator, and student living in Boston. An MFA student at Boston University, Meghan is the winner of the 2023 Claire Keyes Undergraduate Poetry Prize. Her work appears and is forthcoming in the Santa Clara Review, Up the Staircase Quarterly, the Broadkill Review, and others. You can find her on Instagram at Meghan Gets Lit, which I will put in the chat as well. And of course, you can add your questions to the Q&A section of Zoom. Meghan, thank you so much for being here. Take it away.
Thank you, Spencer. I want to thank Mark and Spencer and Livia and the other folks at the Writers' Room for making this possible. I run the reading series Black Box at BU, and I know how much time and effort goes into these events. So thank you. And it feels like kismet that Jen read a poem about growing out bangs because I still have mine. And there's some woes that come with bangs that are too long. So the poems that I have for you today come from this zine that I wrote over the summer called Dream Work, which is also another connection to Jen's work. And over the summer, I was really interested in feminist theory and my matrilineage, so the history of my maternal side of the family. My maternal side of the family came from Ireland, and then they ended up in the Midwest, the Midwestern United States, specifically Michigan. They owned a dairy farm for a very long time. And over the summer, I became interested in works like The Feminine Mystique and The Second Sex and A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. And I was trying to find ways to thread that in with my maternal histories, as well as these photographs that I inherited of my grandmother. So the poems are all going to kind of center around those themes. Each of these poems has an epigraph from Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. And it's my hope that they kind of parallel the histories that I'm documenting in the rest of the poem. So this first one is called Fieldwork. The epigraph from A Room of One's Own reads, "Somehow it was like a signal falling, a signal pointing to a force and things which one had overlooked." It's hard not to think of this drawling road as metaphor. Here they don't take girls hunting, not that I'd asked, but they did take my father. Maybe they only offered to. I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't there when the land changed hands, the spade diving beneath the surface to churn black lung after black lung, making do, going without. Who knows better than the coffin ship, docked and salt wet and bloated, wrung of bodies and names? What do my women do while their men pretend? Where do they go? Where did I? The men push in their chairs. The women gather ice from the icebox, reflex. A cow births her first calf in the field opposite the house. No one is there to call it a miracle. Only the cow, only the calf, only water, ruptured veins. So as I mentioned, I inherited some photographs of my grandmother. Diana liked to take selfies on her cameras, and I have a couple of them. I was really interested in these ideas of self-documentation. Diana married my grandfather, Keith, when she was 18 years old. She gave birth to my mother when she was 20 and had the second child, my aunt, when she was 23. And it's strange that I'm 23 and I don't have any children. And just thinking about the different ways that our lives are influenced by the time and space in which we are residing. So this is inheritance. And the epigraph from A Room of One's Own reads, "For all the dinners are cooked, the plates and cups washed, nothing remains of it all has vanished." What choice did I have? It was unrelenting. I had to take my grandmother's photos, film canisters tenderling to the moment when daughter became mother after unbecoming a wife, the root where soil was ribboned with bone, and wind snapped into a Midwest blade, handprint of land cut open and filled with forgetting, and you, my grandmother, lit the stove, eyes still able to find the break where flame moves blue as bruise or resentment, fingers of fire climbing heirloom pots like bellies webbed with veins. I was with you in that reckoning, the single silence before air streaked with prophecy, and your daughter, my mother, knelt in the living room, unaware and puffy-faced with childhood. The television was on, and the men in it were talking, one line of nothing, after another, after another. So there was a period 2 summers ago where I spent some time out in Amherst, Massachusetts at the Juniper Summer Writers Institute, and a lot of the poems kind of focus on this experience of driving out with the photographs on the passenger seat, and thinking about poetry and children and the similarities that I believe my grandmother and I did have. So this is Inheritance 2. The epigraph from A Room of One's Own reads, "This poet who never wrote a word and was buried at the crossroads still lives. She lives in you and in me and in many other women." It is summer. I am 21. When she was 21, my grandmother had already birthed a daughter. She would soon birth another, her arms bent into cradles. When I write my poems, am I giving birth? When she carried her children, was she carrying poetry? In her journal, my mother wrote, "Why is this part so hard?" I crossed the bridge thinking, why is this part so hard? Highway driving is easy. You do it in your sleep. Do it without thinking, without checking the mirrors twice. 100 women, chased by 100 angry gods, changed into trees. Their arms were still, quiet as sleeping children. They watched me switch lanes, swerve to avoid killing a turtle. Its head emerged from its shell, its body crossing the dashed white line. My grandmother's ring knifed the steering wheel, rapined the dark. My mother's broken watch sunk its severed hands into my wrist. Her photos were still in my purse, next to the wallet full of money I'd earned and the notebooks of poems I'd written. I know it was not quite the same as mothering, not the same as her death without death. Few things are. So I have 2 more. This one's called On Ice, and the epigraph reads, "Now is the time," she would say to herself at a certain moment, "when without doing anything violent, I can show the meaning of all this." It wasn't enough. Life viewed through an open window, through stretched gauze of stockings. Autumn air, cold with wanting, the weather turns like a face starved of touch. Fingerless gloves gone threadbare, having shrunk in the wash, back road, clapboard house, raw milk warm in its bottle, glass rattling against glass like teeth pulled at the root. Time suspends in the heave of a panting bull, tail flickering over a stillborn calf. It was easier to write than to live. Living meant waking, meant making coffee and watching it drip in its own black pool, meant heating the stove to keep your hands moving. Ankles crack as the rest of the body twists, trying to find itself. My grandmother didn't do her homework, but she did do her chores, and I did my best. My grandmother went from her mother's house to her house, and then she became a mother. What was there to photograph? There was the sun pulling up with the kitchen curtains, the camera's flash mistaken for a signal, a calling card, a single broken headlight. And this was the last poem in that zine. It was important to me, I think, to end on a kind of hopeful note, especially where a lot of the content felt quite heavy. And I was really exploring the isolation of housewives living in the Midwest during 1950s and 1960s. And I was hoping to end on a note of possibility. So this is Homegoing. And the epigraph reads, "And when she is born again, she shall find it possible to live and write her poetry." My grandmother holds her risen stomach. My grandfather, mid-laugh, aims a Marlboro cigarette at the camera, his fingers pointed like a gun. Living room. Town where no sky is scraped by glass or concrete, and the kitchen is scrubbed with no-name bleach. I, unlike her, graduate college. I, unlike her, do not bear a child. Was she, like me, told not to drink, not to read books by dirty old men, not to start smoking? Did she kneel on her bedroom floor and pray for peace, her whole life packed into small brown boxes? Did she look at her daughter and see a pearl or a grain of sand? Did she look at her husband and see a man swallowed by sea? Did she wish, however silently, to be swallowed too? I come home, I write, when is it my turn? She looks back from her place on my desk, unblinking. We both know the answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. That was fantastic as well. Um, really gripping poetry. The imagery was fantastic. I loved the kind of repeated imagery of things breaking or bursting through or cutting open, like that kind of it's almost a blooming image, I guess, but with the more uh destructive language. I think it's really interesting kind of pairing there. Jen, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here as well. Thank you everybody for attending. If you have questions, this is our Q&A time. You can throw them in the chat or in the Q&A function in Zoom. As we wait, I have a question for both of you. This is a question that I think all writers get asked from time to time, but I see both of you engaging in particular with elements of the world around you, things that you are encountering in the world. Megan, your epigraphs from Virginia Woolf, and Jen, there was one that struck me in particular. Oh, Moonshadow, of course. I grew up listening to Moonshadow, love that song. And so I wonder if there are other things or how you select things from your world that seem to catch your attention, or what sort of things catch your attention and make it into your writing.
Do you want to go, Megan?
Yeah, sure. I guess on the thread of like other things that kind of grab my attention, I'm at Boston University where I'm doing my MFA in poetry, and I'm working on a project where I'm taking these pop culture women and kind of dissecting and examining the ways in which they were unhinged and the ways in which they were depicted to be unhinged by mostly male media, and trying to kind of pair that with my lived experience and the lived experiences of other women that I know. So I think I try to find ways in which I can either engage with something of the world um, that helps me kind of like see something new about myself, which sounds quite narcissistic, but um, yeah, it's kind of like holding up a jewel to the light and seeing the different facets that are reflected off of it. Um, and these kinds of things of the world are entry points into deeper layers of ourselves and the people with whom we come in contact.
I feel the same way, and I don't know what comes first. That I've already have a concept brewing, and so all of a sudden, everything that I see has meaning in context of the book, right? Like my previous book, The Queen of Queens, it was heavily themed. It was about, it was about a specific woman, and there were images that were going through like pearls and very watery images, round things. So all of a sudden, like when you buy a new car and then you see that car everywhere. So in this book, this was a little bit looser. It didn't have, I was the project for this project book, I guess. Um, so like for example, like Moonshadow, you look back, I think about that song, I'm like, what a horrible song that is, and like what he's talking about, and this whole insistence on gratitude, that we're supposed to learn from things. So I kind of liked that idea, but I also sometimes have old images floating around, like the image of my grandmother, like the dream of her with eyeshadow. My grandmother never wore eyeshadow. She was like this little old Italian lady. I don't even know she owned makeup. So, but that had to go in there, and sometimes it works and sometimes it's a complete failure, and people will say, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm working on this manuscript now that I became obsessed with the movie Suspiria, so I don't know if my friend Sabag is still here in the audience, but she's like read all at one poem after the other after the other. So then you start to get all these images coming at you, these concepts. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you both. I think that it was interesting, Megan, that you brought up the idea of it being sort of, I mean, poetry being sort of a way of seeing the world. And I think both of you turn that eye both on, I mean, you both talk about how it reflects on yourself as well, which I think is interesting as a use of poetry, a purpose for poetry, because there's so many uses for art, and I think the introspective side of things is often
Yeah.
one of the most powerful. We have a few different questions here, so we'll start with Evelyn's from the chat. Can you each describe your creative process? And I think I will add to that as well. Just what gets you writing? I think that that's one of the hardest parts is just sitting down and starting. So what gets you going on the page?
Ugh. I I find writing a poem horrifying. I love revision, which is odd, but the thought of sitting down to a blank page is really really scary to me. Especially when I don't have an idea in mind. So my creative, that's ugh, just on a very physical sense. I tend to write in the morning. I do better in the morning. Anything later in the afternoon, I'm not going to say I never do, but in general, I'm not great with prompts necessarily, except as I said, like if they involve counting for some reason, I can do that. But it's a lot of drafts. I try a lot of things. I don't. My mind doesn't work chronologically. Let me say that. Like I don't tend to write a narrative poem, though I have. I don't think I'm really good at it though. So I have to be really careful. And this kind of goes back to your question, Spencer. Like that's sometimes why I need to have objects from, the real world to sort of tether me so I can hold on to it, and I'm not out, you know, in the atmosphere too long because I might not come back and I leave everybody behind. Um, so I'll write in the morning. I always have people look at my work. Um, I've got a group that looks at my work, and they're brilliant and they're honest, and they don't spare my feelings at all.
Yeah, I agree with Jen's point. Like the blank page is really scary. And I love revising. My drafts tend to be dramatically and drastically different draft to draft. Um I tend to write at night. That's just a holdover. I started writing poetry when I was 7 and then got really into it when I was 13. I think that's kind of a holdover from adolescence is just writing at night felt the most I don't know, there was a special kind of like magic about writing at night. Um, and because I'm in an MFA program, that means I have people already built in who are going to look at my work. And so part of that is sitting with the feedback, sifting through what aligns with my vision and what doesn't. Um, and then really spending more alone time with the draft, trying to figure out sometimes what it's saying in retrospect. Sometimes I feel like it's like those ink blot tests that they have in psychology. Like you don't really know what it's saying sometimes, and the interpretation is very helpful. And then yeah, again, my drafts look quite different. I brought in a draft to my workshop recently, and then I brought in a second draft, and everyone was appalled at how much I had changed. But there's such beauty, I think, in revision. I think of Adrienne Rich's definition, which is like literally to look back as a means of survival. Um, and it's like a survival of the self, but also survival of the work and its heartbeat when we go back and return and change things and try to say them in a more clear way.
And I want to say too, if I'm not reading poetry actively, I'm probably not writing very good poetry. So
Yes.
lately I've been really bad at reading poetry. and sometimes that's okay. So I'm like, okay, this is the time you maybe try organizing your manuscript, or I've learned to be a little bit better with that. I don't have to write a poem every day. Um, but I have to be careful. Then I'll be like, wow, it's been 5 years and I haven't. So
Yeah, that was one of the, I think something that comes up often with people is that there's many ways to write. And so putting words on the page is not the only thing. Revising, organizing, reading is a huge part of it as well. So I think that's all great advice. Thank you both. Um, we have one more question here, and I think we have a little bit of time. We're pushing the envelope a little bit, but I think this is a great question about uh, how would you both how would you say you both engage with memory and the flawed nature of human memory in your work? I think memory comes into poetry a lot, and but both of you are engaging with past generations as well, and there's that sort of lineage of memory that comes with that. I think that I would love to hear how both of you engage with that.
Want me to go ahead, Jen? Okay. Um, yeah, so it's kind of funny. I turned in another poem for a different workshop that was about dissection in high school anatomy class. And I lied at the end of the poem. I kind of made up the memory a little bit. I think it's really hard to want to be so aligned with the truth and how things really happened. And so for me, my engagement with memory has also been like an engagement with ambiguity and an engagement with taking the truth and obscuring a little bit. I'll let Emily Dickinson tell the truth, but tell it all slant. And so I think there's a lot of freedom in writing about also what could have happened, a version of what did happen, and engaging with memory in that kind of like slanted way. But yeah, I mean, the project that I worked on over the summer, dream work, was engagement with memories that I did not have and that weren't even told to me. It was just this kind of like imagination of memory. That's really freeing, I think. To give yourself that space and kind of like veil it in a speaker as well.
I love that you said that at the end of the poem you lied. I love that because poetry is fiction. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not writing memoir, and even that you could say is fiction. So I mean, I know, yeah, in all of my books, I do engage with memory. Obviously, I mean, how can I not? And they're my memories, and somebody could have been at the same event and have, they could have a very different memory. I remember posting a poem on Facebook that had been published, and one of my sisters said that didn't happen. um, I mean, I think that what matters is like the truth, the emotional truth. I can't make that up. Or I can't. Let me say that I'm not good at doing that, as opposed to like all the, everything that went around it. I mean, I've conflated stories. And I'm going to say this, which is going to sound a little bit awful. And know that like I loved my parents, but I probably couldn't have written certain poems if they were still alive. And that sounds horrid, but you know, that's just kind of, I could put the lie in to an extent. That's kind of a horrible thing to say, but there was a freeing in my writing. Ellen Bryant Boyd, who was my teacher in grad school, I mean, her opinion is everything is in service to the poem. Everything is in service to the poem. So like, if you actually had a maple tree out your window, but it works better to have an oak tree, then it's going to be an oak tree. So anyway, I just like did like a post secret, like what I just said. Can you erase that part, Spencer?
I unfortunately don't have editing control. Everyone heard that. But I think that you both have a great point about how memory serves writing in general and art in general. Um, memory is by nature a wonderful resource and completely irretrievable. And so the freedom to feel like you can change things or work with it in an imaginative way, I think, is a great part of not just poetry, but almost all writing and art in general. Um, well, I think that's a great note to end things on. I hope people have fond memories of our reading this evening. Meghan and Jen, thank you both so much for being here. This was truly an
Thank
honor, and I
you.
had so much fun listening to your work and hearing you answer these questions. Um, do either of you have anything that you would like to plug or promote at the end here before we let you go? Uh, okay, well,
Well, on my website, my book is up there. You can pre-order it. So
marvelous, excellent. Yeah, go pre-order
Awesome.
the book.
Yeah, I've got some stuff coming out in Arcana. One of my poems is out on the Southern Florida Poetry Journal, and they actually asked for audio, so you can hear me read that poem. I lied in that poem too, so just to kind of put a plug out there, I guess I'm
woohoo!
just a liar, creative liar. Um, so yeah, this was lovely though. You can follow me on Instagram at meghan.gets.lit, which always gives me a chuckle when I get to plug that. So, and all of my other access points are available in the link in that bio.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. I have a couple of
Thank
writers'
you.
room things to plug as well here at the end. There will be an open house on January 12th, 2025. The exact time is to be determined still, but all of that information will be available on the website and, of course, promoted across social media as well. So if you're interested in the writers' room at all, that's a great opportunity to get to know some people who work there, who spend their time writing there. And then there will also be another writers' room after hours interview in January. The announcement of who that will come out at the end of December. And of course, there will be further readings from the room. We will be on hiatus for December, but we will be back in January. Information will come on that soon as well. I'm excited to bring this into the new year and to bring on some more amazing writers. So again, thank you, Meghan. Thank you, Jen. Thank you all for being here. This has been such a delight. Have a great evening, all of you, and I will see you next time.